Welcome everyone to Birding by Ear. I am Rich Chambers. This presentation is hosted by the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science. So first, let's make sure you can use the chat window. If you haven't yet, move your cursor to the bottom edge and click on chat. That opens a little window. Use it to send me a message during the presentation. I will be asking questions during the class, and the chat window is how you send me your answer, or you may ask a question and send me a comment. I can see some messages already, so good. Many of you know about the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science, but in case you don't, TINS is a wonderful organization whose mission is to advance the natural history, conservation, and ecosystem knowledge of the Tahoe region through research, education, and outreach. They are hosting today's presentation. So let's get started. But first, why learn bird sounds at all? Because when you do, then you'll really enjoy your birding outings even more, because you'll hear many more birds than you see. Once you hear and identify a bird, it becomes much easier to know where to look for it. My personal experience in learning bird sounds is that it is very challenging. Humans typically can learn by their eyes much better than their ears. So we use lots of techniques to learn the sounds other than just listening to them. It will take practice, practice, practice. From now on, whenever you are outside, take the time to listen to your environment as well as to look at it. That's a habit that's pretty easily formed, especially when you hear your very first bird. You'll remember, oh yes, I have to tune into the bird sounds. Yes, learning bird sounds is challenging, but on an encouraging note, once I had a reasonable knowledge of bird sounds, I really enjoyed birding much more than before, and I'm sure you will too. So let's talk about the types of bird sounds, songs and calls. Songs are distinctive, and typically you can use them to figure out what species of bird it is. They're used by the birds to establish and defend territories and maintain pair bonds. You'll hear them a lot during the breeding season, sometimes at other times. And depending on the species, both can sing or just the male. Calls are much shorter and simpler, little chipping sounds typically, and they're used for multiple purposes, especially to keep in touch with each other and when they're in flight. Calls are heard year-round, and both males and females call. I learned the hard way that these tips were really critical to my learning and being able to remember the bird sounds. So the first two are your homework. So pay attention to them. I think it's important to learn 3 distinctive and common birds first. So I've picked out Steller's jay, mountain chickadee, and the red-breasted nuthatch. So work on those and make sure you can recognize those sounds right away. And then second is something that took me a long time to figure out, that the American robin sounds a lot like other birds. So let's take a listen to that. Here's the robin. Here's the black-headed grosbeak. And the western tanager. So I think if you listen to those, you'll see they're definitely sort of similar, but different. But I had a lot of trouble telling them apart at first. So I want you to work on the robin, the grosbeak, and the tanager for next week. So a good tip is to try to describe the sound in words. Use mnemonics or phonetic spelling. The robin says, cheer up, cheerily. Let's see if we can hear that somewhere in this song. So just use whatever works for you. Adjectives, drawings, mnemonics, and especially watch birds sing. It can really glue it into your memory if you hear the bird singing while you're watching it sing. So we're going to use the Western Peewee, Western Wood Peewee, as kind of a sample for how they'll look throughout the presentation. So once you hear the sound, once you learn this sound, it's pretty easy. It's one of the easiest birds to recognize. Once you hear the sound, once you go out in the woods, you're going to hear this a lot because there are a lot of Western Wood Peewees around in the Tahoe Basin. Okay, to me, that sounded like wee-oo. And I tried sketching the sound and I came up with this, kind of an up in pitch and then a downward slope in pitch. So I wanted to talk a bit about spectrograms while we're on this. And that's not something you'll necessarily use a lot unless you really get into this. But it shows you a visual presentation of the sound, and it shows frequency is in the vertical axis. And then time is across the horizontal. And the red color tells you where most of the volume in this sound is coming from. So you can see it looks a little bit like my drawing, a little bit, but there's a lot more detail once you see it in the spectrogram. So I always was curious, how can birds make such complicated sounds? Now, not all birds make complicated sounds. Some of them make pretty simple sounds, but a lot of our what we consider songbirds can make really complicated sounds. And they do it because they've got this organ called a syrinx. And because of this special organ, they can actually direct two separate and independent flows of air through this thing. And so they can make totally two independent sounds at one time. Here's some of the terminology that we use in the class and some that I came up with. And we're not going to go over all of those because that would be pretty boring, but I'm going to pick out a few of my favorites and let's listen to the spiral. And the walk. Okay, let's start it. I'm going to show you that this is a phone thrush. And the walk again. Flat sounds and then we're going to listen to the laugh. Okay, I know you all know this. That was a pinyon jay, an acorn woodpecker, and a western kingbird. And the car starting is one that I have used a lot. That's a Wilson's warbler and a Nashville warbler. Let's listen to the seesaw. Warblers make this sound a lot. We'll get into that. I think it's in class 2. So I'm going to be presenting the birds in groups because I was able to learn better if I could group birds together that had some similarity to their sound. And so what happens in the field is you'll hear a bird and you'll say, ah, that's a member of this group of similar sounding birds. And now instead of trying to figure out which of 350 birds it is, you're down to maybe 5 or 6. That's a big help. Let's listen to the jays. This is going to be our first group for today. So important is to try to figure out what was common about that. So I think they're all loud. Certainly when you hear them in the field, they are. They're rather raspy, kind of non-musical for sure, and they tend to repeat phrases as they go along. So at the end of each bird, we're going to guess what the next bird is. So this is your first chance to use the chat window and tell me what you think this bird is. Okay, well, I see a few guesses coming in. Good work. Okay, so let's move on and you can see what it is. So on each individual slide of a bird, there'll be the picture, of course, and then the map. Always important to know where the bird is. If you want to see the bird, you got to go where the bird is. And then some details that I've noticed in trying to figure out these sounds. So for me, the Steller's jay is pretty distinctive, but it can be confused with the ScrubJay. Listen to the Stellers again for a moment. So those are different, but it's easy to confuse them in the field. So the flicker, let's try that one. So that's definitely different from the Steller's jay, but I still was able to confuse it in the field, so watch out for that. So I've always been interested in how birds are named, so we're going to spend a little bit of time in the class talking about that. And I added it into the class because everything you can remember about a bird helps you kind of guide your memory when you're trying to figure out what bird is that when you see it, or what bird is that when you hear it. So Steller, his name was George Wilhelm Steller, and he was the first European to record the Steller's jay. That was way back in 1741. So he crossed from Russia into Alaska, and he was the first non-native to have set foot in Alaska. So he proposed that since the Steller's jay was like the blue jay, therefore Alaska must be part of North America. You can see a few other animals that his name is on down here. So what do you think is next? Remember, use that chat window. Okay, Jenny got it right, ScrubJay. And someone said that they were having trouble hearing my voice, so I've moved the microphone a little closer, if that'll help. Good. Marie made the comment that ScrubJay is less angry than the Steller. That's a good point. That's the type of thing you're looking for. So again, it can be confused with Steller's jay to me. And most important might be, how would you describe that sound? Again, harsh and scratchy, but what kind of sound does it make? Let's listen and see if you can find these phrases in the sound somewhere. Okay, hope you could see that. So let's take a guess the next bird. Okay, Bonnie got it right. Nutcracker. Let's see. So what do you think of my description here? Again, come up with your own whenever you can, but these kinds of words, if you could call them that, can help you remember. So who was Clark? Of course, he was William Clark of Lewis and Clark fame. The expedition was in the early 1800s. So I found a few interesting things in the book, Undaunted Courage, Meriwether Lewis, Chalmers Jefferson, and the Opening of the American West by Stephen Ambrose. And he talks about their specimen collecting. They actually shipped live specimens back east, and at least one Stiller's jay made it all the way back alive. Amazing. What about this next bird? All right, we have one question. How is a nutcracker different from a magpie when you don't have locality to help? Well, we're going to get to the nutcrackers in a little bit, but they are similar in that they're sort of simple sounds, rather raspy. So this is one of the birds that actually says its own name. Now that's really helpful. But of course you have to realize that it's doing that. And it does make that mag sound. So that's kind of a giveaway for the black-billed magpie. So if you haven't seen them, you can always see them at the South Lake Tahoe Marina. At least I have, every time I've gone down there. So once on a trip to the Central Valley, we mentioned yellow-billed magpies to our guide. He took us down a bunch of streets to a corner where there must have been at least 30 of them. So that impressed me a lot. And yep, you got to go where the birds are. Oh, I forgot to guess. Well, it's a crow. So we have a couple of good questions here. Let me back up a little bit. Does the yellow-billed magpie sound the same? I don't know. And I haven't studied that one because it's not in the Sierra area. And another from Susan, do you see magpies in the actual Sierra Mountains? Well, definitely down at the Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe Marina, you'll see them there. And I have seen them in other places, but not so much. More around the lake, I guess. I'm not sure. Okay, so I think the crow, which is a smaller bird than the raven, so its pitch is higher. Let's listen to the raven for a second, because it can be difficult to figure out, is a raven or a crow. You hear how much lower that is than pitch? Kind of a caw-caw. So let's, I was going to tell you that Will Richardson of TENS told me that crows were common in the basin in the past, but when the raven showed up, the crows took off. So it's pretty rare to see one here. So what's next? Okay. Kristen got that right. It's the raven. So Robin mentions that some crows can have a low call, and I agree. These are somewhat hard to separate by sound. So let's try it. The typical crow is a little bit higher pitched. And the raven a little lower pitched. So someone said, do they mimic other birds like the Steller's jay? Not that I know of. So we're going to move on to a new group of birds. Again, I put birds together that I thought had some similarity in their sound. So your job is to figure out what group of birds this is. So remember, for grouping, it's really helpful, at least for me, to group together birds that sound somewhat alike. I recommend that when you hear a bird sound, you first try to figure out what group is it in. That's easier for me. So David's got it right, woodpeckers and let's take a look. All right, so this is the woodpeckers. They're terrible singers like our first group, raspy and hoarse, very similar. And they're pretty repetitive on a similar pitch. Let's listen to a group of woodpeckers and sapsuckers. Okay, for those of you who are really good at this, that was a Williamson sapsucker, red-breasted sapsucker, a Downy woodpecker, hairy woodpecker, white-headed woodpecker, northern flicker, and a pileated woodpecker. And someone said, if you sound like chipmunks. I think that's definitely true. Now, Roger has a good point that jays can sometimes mimic other birds. especially hawks. And I've certainly seen the Stellar's jay do that, and I've been fooled. So how do you determine it? Well, it's pretty hard because the Stellar's jays are really good at mimicking, especially a red-tailed hawk. So I remember once in South Lake Tahoe, I heard what I was sure was a hawk and crossed the street to go look, and there was the Stellar's jay sitting there. So let's guess the first of this group. Okay. Lauren asked, are we hearing songs or calls? Mostly songs, but these birds don't really have much in the way of a song, do they? All the ones we've heard so far. But they're considered as songs mostly, but I do play sometimes the calls along with the song. Someone asked, are pileated woodpeckers in the region? Yes, they are. Pretty rare. All right, let's see what that was. So you can see that's a Williamson sapsucker, and it makes that kind of jit, jit, jit sound. Someone mentioned that the tapping might be the call for these types of birds. I think that's fair. Yep. Let's see. Now, Williamson, who was he? He was a soldier and engineer, and the bird was named in honor of him. So that must be nice. So what's next? Any guesses on this one? Someone mentioned that they thought that the sapsucker and woodpeckers have a little bit higher pitch than the jays that we looked at previously. That's a good point. Another point I wanted to make is when the bird is tapping, sapsuckers tend to have an uneven tapping. So faster and then slower, where woodpeckers tend to be at the same rate. Let's see if I can get that. Okay, and that kind of a uneven rate for sapsuckers. So what's next? Okay, we got some good guesses. Steve has it right. That's the Downy. This one's easy to remember. Once you realize that the Downy Woodpecker has a sound that goes down in pitch, it's pretty easy to follow. So let's try just a bit of it again so you can hear that. See how it drops in tone? So another interesting thing is that the Downy woodpecker can be separated from the lookalike by little dark spots on the outer edge of the tail, right there, if you can see my cursor. And it has a pretty small bill. So what would be next? Pretty logical follow on. Yep, Marie's got that right. Okay, what do you think? Kind of a same tone whinny instead of the dropping in tone for the Downy woodpecker. So you'll see a lot more hairy woodpeckers in the Tahoe Basin than you will the Downies. Take a guess. Okay, Jenny's got it right. So compared to the Downy and the hairy, the whinny is kind of a very varied tone, up and down a little bit. So I have a lot of these in my feeders, so I get to really enjoy them, especially when they bring the young one to the suet. And some of my friends that lead bird trips say that visitors to the Tahoe region ask to see this bird more than any other. So that's kind of interesting for the white-headed. It's pretty famous. So you notice that Noah Stryker took this picture. Give his book, Birding Without Borders, a try. It's an amazing record of his global big year in 2015 when he saw 6,042 species. How about this one? Kristen's got that right. For woodpeckers, it's important to listen to the tapping. Now notice this tapping was kind of low pitched compared to the Downy and the hairy and the white-headed, because it's a much bigger bird, so it has a lot more power. So these birds love ants, so look for them on the ground. I was at Rabe Meadows twice a month for a course I took, And I saw their head bobbing breeding behavior. It's very interesting. Okay, next. Okay, Jenny got that right. Okay, so this one is somewhat rare in our region, but they are here. And a good giveaway is this description there where it rolls up in pitch and then down and tapers off a bit in volume at the end. So just as a reminder, when you're listening to the sounds, try reading the description of what it sounds like and see if you can hear that in the sound, or even better, come up with your own description. And you notice the drumming was very heavy sounding. Now, interesting, is it pileated or is it pileated? I've heard it pronounced both ways. I pronounced it pileated for at least 40 years. Saw the very first one in Florida at Sanibel Island. And so it comes from the Latin. Let's listen to how it's pronounced.
Pileatus.
So I believe it should be pronounced pileated. Pileated rather than pileated. But that's going to take a while for me to change over. We got a new group. Let's see what you think it is. Okay, Bonnie's got that right. The Vireos. All right, finally we get to some birds that can actually sing. So there are 5 vireos in that group composite I just played. We're only going to study the most likely 2 in the area. So the 5 are cassins, warbling, huttons, plumbeous, and solitary. So what's the first one in this group? Okay, to me, the Cassin's Vireo makes a sound which is a set of short phrases and a short pause between each phrase. So let's see if we can hear that cadence here. So who was Cassin? John Cassin was an ornithologist, and he described 198 species of birds that hadn't been previously described. And 5 birds have his name attached, and he died of arsenic poisoning from touching his collection of bird skins. he had several thousand bird skins. So that was kind of shocking to me, but I took a class at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, and they have a huge bird collection. And so during the class, they would get skins out for us, and we had to wear gloves because of the arsenic danger. Now you might wonder, what's with the arsenic? Well, it was a way of preserving bird skins back in the 1800s. And the problem with the skins is the little bugs would get in them, eat them up, and ruin them, of course. So they would treat them with arsenic. What's the next Vireo? Someone asks if they come here to breed in the spring. Yes, they do. And here it is. So to me, compared to the Cassins, then, we're hearing longer phrases and longer pauses between the phrases. So that can help you figure out which of these two it is. But I want to step back for a minute and talk about a warning. So we have recordings that we're listening to today, and they tend to be of just one or two birds per species from a similar location. So you have to accept the fact that not all warbling vireos or any species is going to sound exactly like the recording you're listening to. So that's just one of the issues with birds. They have dialects much like we do. So don't be put off. It's part of the learning challenge. So an example is I was studying yellow rump warblers for a while, and up here to me their call sounds like fit, F-I-T, kind of fit. And I went down south for a Thanksgiving, I think it was, and saw many yellow rumps down there, and they all said feet, a little bit different. So don't worry about that. It's going to happen, but it just makes it even more fun and challenging. So Susan asked, what's the purpose of the fussy strident sound? You know, I honestly don't know. I'll see if I can find that out. It's some sort of, sounds like a warning to me, but no telling for sure. It's a new group. Nuthatch, yes. So these do sound a little bit like the woodpeckers, but they're a little bit more melodious. So let's listen to the first one, see if you can figure out which one it is. Okay, Bonnie has it right. That's the red-breasted. Do you think it sounds like a tin horn to you? I find this bird pretty unmistakable because of that meet, meet, meet sound that it makes, and you just hear it all the time around here. So this was the first yard bird I saw 8 years ago when we moved to Tahoe. So it's a real favorite of mine. What's next? Okay, we're looking at the white-breasted nuthatch. To me, the white-breasted nuthatch sounds like it's kind of chuckling or laughing at us. What's next? Yep, that's the pygmy. Now you noticed you heard a bunch of them. They tend to flock together, and you'll hear a bunch of that peeping sound when they're around. But they're really tiny, and they tend to be behind the trees, at least when I'm looking for them. I've seen them consistently near Barton Hospital, though. What's this one? Yeah, Lois got it right, brown creeper. So that phrase, trees, trees, a little more trees, that's how I interpret it. You might come up with your own phrase. But frustratingly, I find, is these birds don't always make all those sounds. They might make a little piece of it. Well, a lot of birds do that. Another challenge to figuring out what bird it belongs to what sound. So, you just kind of have to expect that that's going to happen, that the bird isn't always going to make all the sounds that you've learned, but they'll make a piece of it. And so then you have to just kind of figure out, oh yeah, that's a piece of this bird's song. All right. Now, I think they can be confused with the golden crown kinglet, and embarrassingly, I have misidentified a golden crown kinglet as a brown creeper in the past. So watch out for that. See that high-pitched squeaky sound? All right, this is an extra credit guess here. See if you can get it. Now that one's really tough. They don't exist here in the basin. Anybody want to guess? Sounds like a crane, someone says. A swan, a trumpeter swan. Interesting. Okay. And we had a good questions. Do fledglings sound different even though they might look just like an adult? Yeah, in my experience, they definitely do. Have a lot of black-headed grosbeaks in the area, and their fledglings always make a kind of, they don't sing the song like the adults. They make, I'm not sure how to describe it, it's fairly simplistic, probably a call that's saying, feed me, I would imagine. So let's listen to this one more time. I would have said an elephant, but this was a really trick question. Robin guessed a seal. That's a really good guess. So I put this in here just as a joke. It's not even a bird. It didn't even have any feathers. And Will Richardson asked me once, well, where'd you get the audio? Well, really, it's just somebody's imagination I found on the internet. So for the next class, we're at the end of this one. Guess the group that's going to be the first group we'll look at for next week. Any guesses? Warblers, robins, sparrows. Okay. Let's see. Let me back up. So those are wrens, by the way. And here's a list of resources. I'll send out a PDF with all of the slides and the resources listed. And lastly, please take the poll. I'm going to put that up right now. You'll see it on your screen. You should expect a follow-up email. And a great place to access free bird sounds is Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Do your homework. Remember, there's 2 items. And send any comments or questions to me. The next presentation is next Thursday at noon, starting with the Wrens group. And we've got about 7 minutes left. So let me know your questions. Shirley says, where can we find the recording of this meeting? Well, that's a good question, Shirley. We're not sure yet because TENS hasn't told me how they can distribute it. I am making a recording, but I'm not sure exactly where or when it might show up. Now, when you get the PDF in the mail, you'll get all the slides, but unfortunately, PDF you can't load the audio into the PDF. So you're going to have to look for your own resources for sounds, unfortunately, but maybe better because you'll get to hear different versions of the same bird. And they all sound similar, but a little bit different. So any questions? Another thing about the Cornell website is you can almost always find a video of the bird singing, which again, to me is a good way to remember things. Somebody said I sound like Mr. Rogers. I've heard that before. Must be true. So Tim says, when you hear a bird you've never heard before and you don't know the family or the group, or you just kind of out of luck, well, I think you've got to go see that bird. Marie suggested that we have more time to listen to the bird calls next time. Joanna says her submit button won't work, and that will be true if you haven't answered all 9 of the questions. Okay. Linda says her house cat is very confused. Okay. Any other questions? Do I have suggestions about recording birds in the field? I don't, but I bet you can find some information about that at the Cornell website. Can you record bird songs? I've heard people tell me that your phone does a pretty decent job of that, especially if it's an iPhone. But to do a great job, you do need special equipment with a microphone and some sort of horn to capture the sound. Laura wants to know if I'm from Pennsylvania, Virginia, or North Carolina. Good guess, North Carolina. Susan asked, do I lead birding trips? I've only led one, and that's only because a course I took required it. And I can't say that I enjoyed leading it much. And not only that, but I misidentified a flicker as a Steller's jay. How embarrassing. Geez. Okay, a few more minutes. Any more questions? Do I have a favorite bird sound? I do, Miles, and I will be revealing that the last session. Okay. Let's see. What's our homework? Okay. You'll see it in the slides when you get a copy. You are to learn the 3 common birds, Steller's jay, mountain chickadee, and the red-breasted nuthatch. That's the first. The second assignment is to make sure that you can tell 3 sound-alike birds apart: the American robin, black-headed grosbeak, and western tanager. And Robin says that it's okay to make mistakes. Well, it better be, because I sure make a lot of mistakes. So I have a CD that I listen to in the car. That's how I got started on the bird songs. And it has a quiz at the end, and there's 91 birds in this, in the quiz, and they do give you the location, so that's helpful. And I think the best I've ever done after several years of trying this is to get about 70 of the 91. Let's see, someone says, what's the name of the CD? It's in the resources section of the slides you'll get. Okay, someone would like to hear the songs more, twice at least. Okay, we'll do that next time. Let's see, Marie says, for some species, it's not legal to record them as it can be disturbing. Huh, interesting. I've heard that applied to playing back the sound, but never recording it. Interesting. Okay, well, we've got about 30 seconds left. Anybody else? Any questions? What CDs? It's on the resources list. Well, thank you everybody for attending. It's been great. Appreciate your comments and questions. And we had about 66 attendees today. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next Thursday at noon.